So how many people here like food? I think it was a safe audience. I've loved food all my life. It's just, am I okay? No. It's got a rattle. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed a few of those. Those are some of my favorite food shots. These are food we make at the restaurant, very simple and very similar along the lines of what our other speakers have been speaking about. To me, food is just so much about life. It's one of the greatest experiences we get as human beings. I love the variety of food. I love everything about it. Food is fun. Food brings people together. Food gets you to try things from all over the world. And food is community. I've been cooking since I was 10 years old. I spent a couple of years in my father's restaurant. I should have learned not to open a restaurant after that, but it was an amazing experience for me and really shaped a lot of my thinking. As we said earlier, I'm also an entrepreneur and a businessman. And so I came to this country in 1995 with this amazing passion for food and saw this internet thing going on. Well, I guess this is probably worth a detour. So worked very closely with my brother on a company in the 90s. We built the first maps and door-to-door directions, which was an incredible thing to see. First time ever seen on the internet through our company. And that was a great success. And it was we sold it in 99. And I decided that it was an opportunity for me to go spend my life on food and use what I had achieved through that. So I went to the French Culinary Institute in New York and had the fortunate or unfortunate experience to graduate just before 9/11. I lived very close to the World Trade Centers, was woken up by the planes hitting the building. Went through all the insanity of that experience. But one of the great things about it was because I was below the food curtain, the security curtain, I was able to volunteer for the firefighters. And I spent 6 weeks cooking salmon with dill sauce, mahi poached in olive oil, putting it in a cooler, driving it in an ATV down to ground zero, and serving it to firefighters outside of these giant smoldering heaps of metal. And it was really then that I kind of appreciated the power that food has to bring community together. And it was that point that I decided I would go to a restaurant. And in 2004, I opened a restaurant with my two co-founders, Hugo Matheson and Jen Lewin. And we opened the kitchen. The kitchen is a great little restaurant. It's you guys would love it. We work with farms. You just can't go wrong. The food is local, it's fresh. Obviously, we're in Colorado when possible. But most importantly, it was really what we wanted to eat. It wasn't a concept. It wasn't, oh, let's do something fancy. It was literally, where are we going to want to eat every single meal of the day? And that's what we created. And it was a phenomenal experience. And then turned that around and said, okay, since we've been fairly fortunate, let's give back. And we were working with local nonprofits to put gardens in schools, which have an amazing impact on kids. And we'd do about 2 a year. And it was quite a powerful way for us to give back to the community. The problem was, of course, I was bored. I had been, and at the time was still involved in very, very big companies, from PayPal to SpaceX to Tesla to many others. And it was just simply not satisfying for me as a businessman to continue to do this. And so I left. And I went back into the software business. And, doing, obviously, people consider very exciting things. But I was pretty miserable. And I was not doing what I love. And so what I was doing was basically doing, for whatever reason we do it, what the society expects of us. And then one of the best things that happened to me was in Valentine's Day of 2010, I broke my neck. I was horizontal for 2 months, paralyzed on my left. I'll tell you how, because everyone wants to know. I was going down a ski hill in an inner tube at 35 miles an hour. Don't do that. And the tube flipped, I landed on my head, and that was it. Doctors said I won the lottery, that I even survived at all. And it was an amazing experience for me, because what it forced me to do was to re-look at my life and say, what is this really about? And for those who haven't almost killed themselves, if not for the physical trauma, I highly recommend the psychological awakening. So I went back to the restaurant business. I actually resigned my software CEO position from the hospital. And I went back to my business and said, you know, there's no excuse. Now I'm going to work in the food business, and I'm going to figure out a way to scale the restaurants. I'm going to figure out a way to scale the gardens and schools and do what I love to do. And so went into the restaurants. That turned out to be not as hard. So I was obviously caught in my own head, because when we tried, it was quite easy. People do love this food. There are a lot of people that love farm-to-table food. We started with the kitchen in 2004 with the idea of serving 50 to 60 people a day using local farm fresh food. We now have 4 restaurants in the Denver area, and we serve 10,000 people a week. And so it's really an amazing amount of people out there that want to eat this food. And so it was really in my head that I wasn't able to do it, and went out and also created a lower cost version of what we do, which is this restaurant here called The Kitchen Next Door. And serving food like kale chips, which is a extremely high nutrient dish. It's not particularly low fat. I mean, it's fried in oil, but it's absolutely delicious, extremely nutritious, and a great way to spend the day if you like food. The other things we'd serve is tomato soups, basic sandwiches that would work with local farm pork. And if we couldn't do local farms because there just wasn't the volume, we'd work with good natural producers from around the country. And to the point earlier, you can't actually always do local. We're just in a country that doesn't have a year-round season. But you can work with good quality food from around the country. And we also had a very strong kids program. So instead of doing the traditional mac and cheese or pasta with butter sauce, we really wanted to challenge the kids a little by creating, honestly, not particularly challenging dishes like pork sandwiches or tomato soups and things like that, that would encourage them to come in. And then we would give all the profits from this towards the gardens. And we really created what turned out to be quite a popular restaurant, not just for the adults, but for the kids. And I was very happy with it. But as I said, that was the easy one. The hard one was the gardens. And what I was able to do in those 2 months was really look at the problem. At the time, thinking how powerful these gardens were, not really realizing the scope of the problem. And the problem is awful. The reality of our kids today is that 1 in 7 kids go into kindergarten obese. 30% of our kids are overweight or obese. It is a crisis of epidemic proportions. I had to find out how the hell we got here. So what I did was I went to Stanford, and they've been working on following the obesity trends. And this is an interesting set of slides. You'll see the green dots are states. These are states with under 15% obesity in 1995. Indiana is the pink dot. It's the only state above 20% obesity. If we go forward to 1998, you'll see we have 1 state, West Virginia, that goes over 25% obesity. You have 10 states that are over 20%. 2001, we get Mississippi. It's the first state over 30%. 2004, over 10 states over 30%. And then 2008, almost every single state is over 30%. And 2 years later, in 2010, 46% of adult Americans are obese. I mean, we got a problem. Holy shit. And school gardens are not going to solve this problem, but I'll tell you right now, they'll make a big difference. But we have a major problem that we all have to figure out. And so I went into this, and I said, well, what could I do? I mean, I'm obviously one guy. I can't do everything. So I'm going to tackle one thing, and I'm going to try and find out how best to do it. And so I started to dig into the gardens and to understand why these gardens were as effective as they were. And as part of that, I created, actually, let me get to this first. Relevant to business, the cost of this problem is not just a lifestyle issue. It cost us $450 billion in 2010 in medical care and lost productivity. It's expected to double by 2018. This is a very real problem. Universal health care costs, or is expected to cost $150 billion a year. This is 3 times the cost of universal health care. So I created the Kitchen Community. It's a nonprofit. It works across the country. And our goal was to take this idea of a learning garden, which we created, and put it in schools across the country to reverse trends in childhood obesity and improve test scores. And the data that I was working with was really powerful. And this is not our data. This is data that has been around for about 10 years. These gardens have an incredible impact on these kids' diets. So they go from 2.5 portions a day to 5 portions a day in vegetable consumption by the time they reach 6th grade. That's a sea change in their diet and a sea change in the lifestyle that they're going to have for the rest of their lives. And then using these gardens as experiential learning tools, you can increase test scores by up to 15 points. Science especially, literacy is amazing, math, history, it's an amazing learning tool for us to use. So I looked at the problem and I said, okay, well, what can I do about it? There's a lot of garden companies, a lot of nonprofits that are putting gardens in schools. What's the value that I'm going to add? And so I looked at these gardens and I said, well, one of the problems is they're sitting in the corner of the schoolyard with a fence around them. And the fence is meant to protect the garden from the kids. And the fences are expensive. They're about $10,000 for a fence, so not cheap. And they're just a dirt patch inside the fence. Incredibly hard to teach inside. So if a teacher tries to bring 25 kindergartners into a fenced-off area, it's a nightmare. And so really it requires all this extra assistance to teach in the garden. And it's also this irrelevant piece of ground that's in the corner of the schoolyard that kind of lives and dies based on the passion of some random parent. So I really wanted to change that around and to say the learning garden is not an option. It can come and go as we please. It is like a basketball court. It is like a playground. It is fundamental to the life of the school. And what I created was this idea of a garden that sits on the playground. It has no fence around it. It encourages kids to actually enjoy it during recess. We did a program in Chicago with the support actually of Chase, J.P. Morgan Chase and others, to try it in Chicago, which is a much more challenging city. And we did 6. And unfortunately, in Chicago, you guys don't even have recess. So this was, it's rough. So we went and we were the only thing on the playground. And it was really, really bad. And I really hope that everything will change with a lot of the changes that are coming to CPS over the next few years, and we might be able to be part of that. But the point is that we wanted this to be a place that kids would spontaneously come and play in. And it became, in a place like Chicago, a place that was the most beautiful part of the school. And teachers would come out and teaching it spontaneously. The idea was not that they were forced to come out, but to say, hey, this is a beautiful day outside, let's go read a book. The lessons that they can teach are incredible. You don't just teach gardening, you teach science, you teach history. In fact, we don't even encourage them to teach gardening. One of my favorite classes is a history class, where the teacher puts one group on one side, the other half on the other side of the garden. They pick the vegetables, they see what's ripe. That's a very powerful lesson. They come together and they start trading. And that is a history lesson on how the pioneers survived. They'll never forget that lesson in their lives. Forget the test scores. That's an incredible way to teach our kids. A couple of other things we did was these fit on any schoolyard. So they're made up of almost like Lego blocks. They're put together. They can go on asphalt pavement, rooftops, toxic soil, which is a real problem. They can go in 200 square feet. They can go in 10,000 square feet. We built a drip system into it to make it very easy for these gardens to be maintained. They just get plugged in and they take care of themselves. We create the gardens in 4 hours. So we'll come into a school, we'll put the beds down, the community comes together around 9 in the morning. They're usually done by lunchtime. These are 2,000 square foot gardens that would normally take months to put together. And the reason why this is important is there are 675 schools in Chicago. There are 100,000 elementary and middle schools in the country. If we can't do 10, 100, 1,000 a day, we're not going to get there in time to make any difference. The other thing that was important was scale. So we have a factory now that is capable of building 2 full learning garden environments per day. So that's about 700 a year. We're scheduled to do 50 this year, up from 1 last year. We're going to try and do 180 next year, and we're going to work on 60 of them in Chicago, which would be about a 10% penetration into the Chicago schools market. And so what we're trying to do is to actually have an impact, to make a difference in the community. And one of the greatest things that I'm able to share with you today is the results are incredible. Chicago was a very difficult market, or at least that's what everyone told us. And we had our harvest last week, and these kids, this is at Miles Davis Elementary School, an extremely underserved school in Chicago. These kids have now have their lives changed. They have never seen a vegetable grow. It was like going to the zoo for them. And this is their lives now, and it is an incredible, incredible thing to see. Thank you.